Hi, everybody joining us from North Carolina, Ohio, West Virginia. Wonderful. Thank you for joining us this morning for today's webinar, How Does Plastic Pollution Impact Your Watershed? Today's webinar is presented by the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection, the West Virginia Project WET program, and the West Virginia Youth Environmental Program. So today's speakers, I'm the first one, Tomi Bergstrom. So nice to meet everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. I'm the Western Watershed Basin Coordinator and the Project WET Coordinator at West Virginia DEP. And I'm gonna get Tom going here to introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here, and I appreciate Tomi giving me the opportunity to participate in this webinar. As she mentioned, I work for the Youth Environmental Program here in West Virginia, and I work out of Charleston. I'm the District 5 coordinator. And here in a few minutes, I'll tell you a little bit more about what the Youth Environmental Program does. And later in the webinar, I'll piggyback on some of Tomi's information and see if I can add to it. And also, we have I don't know how many young people from West Virginia are on here, but we have a recycling little contest that we're going to be doing with the youth program. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit more about that as well as we get towards the end of the program.
All right, thanks, Tom. All right, so today's topic, how does plastic pollution impact your watershed? We're going to be learning what this term watershed means, and then also what plastic pollution actually looks like in our water systems. So this morning, we're going to be talking about what DEP does and what is a watershed. I hope to get you really familiar with what that term means. We'll be discussing how water enters and exits West Virginia and what types of pollution can be in it. We'll go over a really brief history of plastic and how it has worldwide and local impacts and what some people are doing about it. And that will segue into Tom's discussion. So at the Department of Environmental Protection, what does West Virginia DEP do? Protect the environment, maybe? So if we look at this picture, this shows our beautiful New River Gorge Bridge in Fayetteville, West Virginia. And this is just an example of what your environment could be. So we have a lot of different things in our environment. We have air, we have clouds, we have people, maybe structures. We have lots of different trees, especially in West Virginia, a very green state, lots of different plants. And we have lots of different animals, and we also have lots and lots of beautiful fresh water. So within the Department of Environmental Protection, we work on a lot of different components of that. So Tom is going to tell you a little bit about what he does at DEP.
Okay, thanks, Tomi. So I work for the Youth Environmental Program, as we mentioned, and the Youth Environmental Program has been around for a long time. It's actually started in 1963, and it was started under the Division of Natural Resources. And it was, at that time, it was referred to as a Youth Conservation Program. In 2001, the name changed to the Youth Environmental Program, and in 2005, the YEP, the program moved under the Department of Environmental Protection. So and the mission has been basically the same since its beginning. What we try to do is you can go ahead and advance. I'm not seeing my slides, Tomi. I'm so sorry. There they are. Okay, there we go. Thank you. So the mission stayed basically the same since the inception of the program 57 years ago. What we want to do is we want to get young people thinking about the environment, why it's important to protect the environment, and why it's important to make sure that our water and air and land is clean in our state. So the way we do that, we go into schools, we go into 4-H clubs, scout troops, and other youth organizations, and we talk to them about protecting the environment, and we give them ideas for projects they can do that will benefit their community and benefit the environment, such as litter cleanups or recycling drives, maybe going to learning how to sample water at a local stream to see what kind of water quality they have, planting trees and flowers, just all kind of different projects we encourage them to do. The good thing about that is they have an opportunity to submit us reports on what they're doing. And one time every year, we give out $15,000 in cash awards to the best projects around the state. And so that's kind of an incentive for them as well. We also give a $10,000 college scholarship to a high school senior who's enrolled in the youth program. And we also have 3 main events throughout the year. We have Youth Day in May, which is at North Bend State Park. We have Junior Conservation Camp, which is at Cedar Lakes and Ripley. Then we have a Youth Environmental Conference, which is in the fall, and it rotates to different parts of the state. Our camp is for 11 to 14-year-olds, and the Youth Environmental program that we do where we rotate the conference, that's for 13 to 18-year-olds, so an older crowd there. And of course, this year we've had to cancel our Youth Day and we had to cancel Junior Conservation Camp, but we are still judging projects. We are still awarding the cash prizes to groups around the state, and we'll be announcing those soon. Also, you can go ahead and advance, Tommy. So this is the groups that are enrolled. We have about 900 groups around West Virginia that are actually enrolled in the youth program. You can see the list there. And it's actually a free program. There's no cost, there's no obligation. Now we have 900 groups enrolled, but that doesn't mean that all 900 are filing reports and are active. We also have schools that enroll as entire schools. Then a class can enroll at the same school. So not all 900 groups are active, but a good bit of them are, and we certainly appreciate everything they do. And it's kind of like having a library card. I tell people when they join the youth program, it's, doesn't cost anything, and we're pretty much there for whenever you need us. And we're a great resource, and we love working with the youth in West Virginia. And it's a great program. As I mentioned, it's been around a long time. We've accomplished a lot of things in the state, and it's very important to make sure that our young people are educated about the environment and become good stewards of the environment.
All right, thank you, Tom. So Tom told you a little bit about what he does within DEP, and what I work with in DEP is water, which is certainly part of our environment wherever you're at in West Virginia. So with Project WET and with the basin coordinator position, we go out and do work a lot with the public through community events, outreach events. We help pick up trash out of the streams or facilitate that. We work with watershed groups, which are these wonderful nonprofits that we have across the state, and of course with students and educators. So let's dive into this term, watershed. What is a watershed? Well, if you look at this picture to your left, you might notice it kind of looks like a leaf. If you'd flip over a leaf and look at the veins on it. It also kind of looks like the veins that run through our body or the nerves that run through our body. And this pattern is something that we actually see all over in nature, which is pretty cool. A watershed is simply a geographical area though. And that's what this picture is trying to show you. It's a part of land, it's also water, and it all drains down to a common outlet. So simply put, a watershed is a drainage basin. On this diagram, you can see how there is a ridge line. So the elevation of the land around us is what determines the boundaries of a watershed. So as it rains, water is going to flow down through smaller streams and then enter into a larger stream. It will be contributing its water downstream. And all of this will exit through a main outlet. So that whole area, that whole land mass is called a watershed. So when water lands on a slope, it's going to hit the highest point and it's going to flow to the lowest point. And if you've ever been outside when it rains, maybe you've seen that before or experienced it. This is how we can have a flash flood if we have a lot of rain hit us at one time, especially if the ground is already saturated. So this is just a little diagram showing how the water is going to move from the highest point to the lowest point. And it has several different examples of that. And this is from our Project WET activity, Seen Watersheds. This is a cool experiment that you can do at home to show other people what a watershed is. So you can take a piece of wax paper and fold it in half. This will create a ridge line. You can then spray colored water onto the piece of wax paper, or you can put a piece of marker and spray clear water onto it and see what happens. So whenever you start spraying the water onto the paper, the water that sheds off to the left side will be part of one watershed. Let's call it watershed A. The part that flows off to the right side would be considered watershed B. So this ridge line is a boundary that separates our watersheds from each other. So why do we use this term watershed so much, and why is it important? Watersheds collect water and they send them out downstream to other components of our whole water body systems. If it rains in a city, for example, maybe you've seen that happen before. The water may become discolored because it has dirt in it, or oils or chemicals. That then collects and goes through a storm drain and out a storm drain outlet into a major water body, usually a river, sometimes an ocean. Whatever is collected by this water then gets flushed out into our watershed. And as you're going to learn today, water connects us across the globe. So whatever is put into your water is going to flow downstream to somebody else. And maybe there's somebody upstream of you too. So that's something you want to consider. Now, wherever you stand at on planet Earth, you're standing in a watershed, because it can rain anywhere on planet Earth. And so therefore there is a drainage basin everywhere on planet Earth. If you would like to learn the specific name of your watershed, you can visit this website listed on the slide. It's water.usgs.gov. And you can type in your zip code and it will show you the exact name of the watershed that you live in. This is a short little video just reinforcing what we just learned about.
What is a watershed? Is it a shed that holds water? Nah, try again. A watershed is all of the land that drains into the same location or body of water. People tend to think only of water bodies such as rivers, lakes, and wetlands as being part of their watershed. However, any land, whether it is park, farm, forest, school parking lot, and even the soil we build our homes on is also included. Think of a watershed as a funnel, collecting all the water within a specific area and draining into the nearest body of water. Drop by drop, water is channeled into soil, groundwater, creeks and streams, making its way to larger rivers and eventually the ocean. Everyone in the world lives in a watershed. Watersheds know no political borders, whether local, national, or international. Our environment, our economy, and our society all depend on a healthy watershed.
All right, so hopefully that helped explain a little bit more what a watershed is. And if you're somebody that likes to learn even more, we do have some virtual lessons online at our Project WET website. So you can go through and complete this for free. It's called Seen Watershed, and I explained a little bit about what that covers, of course, watersheds. But you can visit projectwet.org, and we do have virtual lessons there for you to be able to complete that. Okay, it's time for our watershed wrap-up poll. So I'm launching a poll right now for you folks to participate in, and it has a few questions. The first one is, when it rains, does water flow downhill or uphill? The second one is, what is a watershed? The third one is, what can be part of a watershed? So to answer the first question, when it rains, does water flow downhill or uphill? And yes, of course, it flows downhill, and that's due to gravity. What is a watershed? It is a geographical area through which water flows across the land and drains into a common body of water, or what I like to call it, it's a drainage basin. This last one is a trick question. What can be part of a watershed? So remember that it is a geographical area, so whatever might be on that geographical area can be considered part of a watershed. So that would include creeks and groundwater for sure. Rocks and soil also, trees and plants also, animals and people, and cities and farms or whatever other structures might be there. So it is all of those components can be part of a watershed. Thank you for participating. We'll continue through now. So let's talk about how water can enter West Virginia. And this is not true just for West Virginia, it's true for all states. But water can come into your state through groundwater. So down underneath us, especially in West Virginia, we have major groundwater aquifers. And these are big storage areas that hold water. Some of the water is very, very old and has been down there a very long time. Some of it is closer to the surface. And so whenever we have a drought, that's how we still have water in our major rivers, is because of our groundwater feeding into it. And some of these groundwater aquifers are really, really big, so they can span across state borders. Of course, water can also enter our state through precipitation. And here today in West Virginia, that's exactly what it's doing. So we have some rain coming into us, maybe from a different state or from the ocean. Also through our rivers. So maybe we have a river that flows into West Virginia, or maybe when it floods, it overflows into our state. So this is a picture of West Virginia showing how we have so many watersheds, and we have water all across our state. So it makes this really beautiful design. So we have 9,000 streams, 32,000 stream miles, and 32 major watersheds. So we have a lot of surface area, or a lot of surface water in our state. Pretty much if you walk to the bottom of a hill, you're going to find some water. So water can exit West Virginia simply by flowing out through our rivers. That's the main way that it does it. And we have this really neat thing that runs through our state called the Continental Divide. And if you think back to that piece of wax paper and how you're spraying water on it and water sheds to the left or to the right, that's essentially what the Continental Divide does for our state. So west of the Continental Divide, we have 47 counties. All of that water flows into the Ohio River and then the Mississippi River out into the Atlantic Ocean. On the right-hand side, so east of the Continental Divide, we have 8 different counties. All of the water that lands in those areas flows out into the Chesapeake Bay, which is also part of the Atlantic Ocean. So even though we are a landlocked state, all of our water flows out into the Atlantic Ocean. And a really neat thing that we have that's very unique to West Virginia is that we have 8 different rivers that originate in one county. So we actually have water that originates, comes out of the ground, and flows onto the surface and leaves our state. Water can also exit our state through the water cycle. So of course, maybe you've seen a nice misty morning where it's foggy, or you've been outside where the humidity is about 60 or 70%. So that water can evaporate out, it can condense, and then precipitate down into another state or even into the ocean. So we know how water can enter and exit our state. So let's talk about how clean that water can be. So in my world, we have 2 different types of pollution. We have a thing called non-point source pollution and another one called point source pollution. Non-point source is what I work with, and it's a little tricky because it's hard to tell exactly where that pollution came from, who it came from. It can come from many different areas. It's essentially whatever is picked up by water when it rains and washes into our river systems. So if you've ever been in Charleston, West Virginia, and you've seen the Elk River flowing into the Kanawha River, which happens right at our state capitol, you might notice that the Elk River has this very brown color to it, and you can actually see the plume of it flow into the Kanawha River. That discoloration, that sediment and dirt that is in the Elk River, is a type of non-point source pollution. It's probably from many different folks contributing, many different areas throughout that watershed where the soil is loose and washes into there. So it's not from a single source. Point source pollution is something that is regulated thanks to the Clean Water Act. And the Clean Water Act, when it came along, it really helped us clean up our streams because it gave us a tool to regulate industry from just dumping anything into the water. Not just industry, but anybody from just dumping into our water systems. So point source, you can point at it. It usually has a pipe. Those are usually regulated through a permitting system within your state agency. So the type of pollution we're going to be talking about today is non-point source pollution. And this can come from neighbors, farms, cities, communities, yards. It can come from you. So these are 4 different examples of that. So the top left-hand corner picture, this guy is out here fertilizing, maybe at a golf club or something like that. And folks have a tendency to over-fertilize. So those excess nutrients can wash into our waterways when it rains. If you have cattle and allow them to get directly into the stream, cattle tend to muck up areas, and so it loosens the soil and creates erosion. So whenever it rains, the water can become muddy from that. It can also have fecal coliform in it. And that's what our little pupper is doing down here in the bottom right-hand corner. A good responsible landowner or dog owner should pick up after their animal uses the restroom outside, especially if it's in an urban area. Because if that gets really condensed, when it washes into our stream, it does have bacteria in it. And I'm sure that everybody has seen the beautiful oil sheen that can be on a parking lot, and that's from oil dripping off of an engine block. So whenever it rains, that can potentially wash into a storm drain, which leads right out into our rivers. Now, the main thing we're going to be talking about today, of course, is plastic. Plastic is what I like to call our problem child. Plastic is made up of synthetic polymers, so it's not something that is natural. It's not like paper, which is derived from natural polymers. It's synthetic. It's derived from petroleum oil, and it is man-made. So it's not on planet Earth until we invented it and created it. And this happened really in the 1950s. So we knew about plastic. It had already been developed, but people didn't realize how much you could use it for, the different things that you could make out of it. And by 2017, we were producing 400 million pounds of plastic. That's a lot of plastic. Plastic is very lightweight, so you can imagine 400 million tons. That's a lot. And that's because we started using it for pretty much everything that we do. So we use it for our fast food, for our bags, water bottles, flip-flops, cosmetics, food containers, toys, you name it. So the problem with that is that if this is located, it gets discarded out by a stream, it's very lightweight, very buoyant, and it can flow into our river systems. And we know now that our river systems lead out to our oceans. Plastic does have a path. So it can wash in through storm drains, which lead out to our rivers and our oceans. Sometimes these trash dumpsters are not managed properly, and the lid is not secured on them, so it can blow out of the trash dumpster. Also, if people are diligent and they do put it into a trash can, maybe it blows over, an animal gets into it, who knows what might happen. But wind blows this stuff into our creeks too, because it is so lightweight. And eventually that can build up to look something like this. And you might think, well, it's okay, we put it in our trash and then it goes to a landfill. Well, all of our landfills are of course located on our land, and they are filling up very quickly because we are producing so much of this plastic, and it has to go somewhere, so it goes into a landfill. If these landfills are not managed appropriately, then it has the potential to get out into our river systems and cause pollution. In the 1950s is when this really started to take off. And this first picture here on the left-hand side, this is a picture from Life magazine, which is a very popular magazine, and it's celebrating how we have all this single-use plastic, how it's fantastic that you don't have to do dishes anymore. You can just have supper, and then you can throw away the plates and the forks and the cups and everything, and you don't have to spend all that extra time cleaning up after you eat. So this was celebrated, especially in the United States. And by 2018, 40% of all the plastic that we produced was single-use plastic. And so that means this is a type of plastic that is only used one time, maybe sometimes just for a few seconds. And then it's going to the landfill or has the potential to get into our waterways. So how is this starting to impact our planet? What's happening from this? So let's look at our planet. Out in our oceans, we have these different currents that flow together, and they form areas called gyres. So we have 5 of them total across planet Earth, And essentially the warm currents and the cold currents flow together and it creates a swirl. This is an area where plastic, given it might be out in the ocean, could potentially gather. And that's exactly what we're starting to see. So the one that is closest to us and gets a lot of attention is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Now this garbage patch is floating out in the ocean, so it's not a solitary thing. So the size of it can change quite a bit. But it is believed to be at least twice the size of Texas, but most likely much larger than that. And if we think about how plastic might get out there, I think in the United States in particular, we tend to believe that we are not contributing this plastic, that we do a much better job of getting it into landfills and that it doesn't get out into the oceans. However, you can tell from this picture right here that we are one of the major users of this. So we generate solid waste. And we know that most of the trash that is generated is plastic nowadays. So we're very guilty in that aspect. Until we stop demanding plastic goods, they will continue to be produced and then have the possibility of getting into our watersheds. So this basically looks like trash soup. Some of the pieces are very, very small as this, or they're even smaller in a thing called microplastic, which is something that we can't see with our naked eye. You'd have to use a microscope to see it. And essentially looks like a soup out there floating around together. And about 46% of it is actually fish netting. So it's really big entanglements of these fish nets that have been pushed together through a current in these gyres. So another impact that we can have from this is a thing called bioaccumulation. So remember those little tiny bits of plastic that I was talking about? Those have the potential to be ingested by small animals. And then through our food chain, everybody knows how that works. A bigger fish might eat a smaller fish that has bits of plastic ingested in. And then that larger fish eats that. And then maybe we eat that large fish, like a tuna. And so people are beginning now to investigate, are there any impacts associated with that? Can plastic potentially be in our food sources? And are we potentially ingesting plastic? So this is something new because plastic has not been around very long. And so scientists are now investigating that. Also, if you're out on a beach, the beach is not going to be safe any longer if it has plastic all over it. Bacteria can grow on plastic, algae can grow on plastic, and it can be harmful for us and other animals. And also, it's visually just not very pleasing if you're out at a beach and there's trash everywhere. Unfortunately, many different animals can mistake plastic for food. And that's because, again, it's very new to our planet. Our planet has been here for a long time, and plastic has been here for just, since about the 1950s, really regulated and out in our environment. So turtles can mistake it for jellyfish. Even land animals, not aquatic animals, they can also mistake this for food. Animals can get caught in this plastic netting that is out in the middle of these gyres swirling around. And it's believed that almost every type of shorebird has ingested some form of plastic. And they can ingest plastic, or they cannot digest plastic no matter how small or large they are. So even us as humans, as a little bit of a larger mammal, we cannot ingest it, and these animals cannot either. They cannot digest it. This is just an artist's rendition of what might be happening on our planet. So even really large animals, such as whales, they can still ingest plastic and it can potentially kill them. So this is just bringing awareness to that fact. No matter how big or how small the animals are, they can be very, very heavily impacted from ingesting plastic. So let's recap a little bit on this. Plastic can take between 400 to 1,000 years to break down. And it doesn't ever actually break down because it is a synthetic polymer, man-made. So it just breaks down into a smaller thing called a microplastic, something that we cannot see with our naked eye. This gets out into our rivers from wind or rain or from littering. It flows into our ocean from our rivers. It then has the potential to entangle animals or for them to ingest them. And it has the potential to break down into microplastics in these gyres where it's swirling out in the ocean. Most of the commonly found plastics out in these are single-use plastics. So these ones that are used only one time. So I think we can all agree, plastic is awful, right? So thankfully, people are realizing that. We're starting to see some change. People are developing these machines that can skim plastic off of our surface waters. There's one place called the Ocean Cleanup System 001, and they are hoping to reduce 50% of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch in 5 years. So there's so much out there, it could potentially take them 5 years to just reduce it by 50%. And that's just one gyre out of the 5 that we have swirling out there. Some states took a stance and said, we are completely banning plastic bags. And you might notice a lot of the states that took this stance are ones that are located along the coast. And that is probably because they are really seeing the impacts of plastic pollution on their coastways. Other people, this is a really neat group in Kenya called Ocean Soul, and they take flip-flops that wash up, and there's millions of them, and they turn them into art to create awareness about plastic pollution. In town here in Charleston, we have a group called the Charleston Stormwater Program, and they are always doing different interesting things to create awareness about single-use plastics or just any plastics. So this is a mini putt-putt that they had up at our festival last year, and it's made completely of single-use plastics. So there's a lot of ways that you personally can help reduce plastic getting into our water. If you do a quick Google search, you'll have all kinds of different things come up. But you, of course, can try to take a stance and stop using single-use plastic. You can use recycled plastic bottles, you can recycle plastic bottles, or maybe say, hey, I'm not using any straws for the whole year. I'm not using any plastic bags for a whole month. Whatever it is that you can manage, do your best. You can donate your toys to secondhand stores, or one of my favorite things that people can do, because it makes you really feel good, is you can go out and participate in a stream cleanup. So within DEP, we have 2 different programs that specialize in just that. One of them is REAP, and one of them is the West Virginia Make It Shine program. Both of these programs support citizens of our state picking and removing trash from our waterways and from our roadways. We can offer you free bags, gloves, and litter pickers. So as long as you have the manpower to go out there and help us clean this stuff, we can remove it from our environment. So we want to ask you to help us keep the water clean for all the beautiful life that is on planet Earth, aquatic and on the land. And of course, you know that also includes humans. Okay, it's time for our plastic wrap-up poll. So you should have a poll come up now. This one has a couple questions, I think 4 total. So the first question is, what can be made from plastic? The second one is, there's only one gyre in the ocean and therefore only one garbage patch in the ocean. The third one is, plastic is a synthetic polymer that does not biodegrade in our environment. Is that true or false? And the fourth one is, what can we do to keep plastic out of our rivers and ocean? All right, so the first question, what can be made from plastic? And this was another one of my trick questions. All of these items can be made from plastic. So spoons, cups, plates, toys, Christmas decorations, food storage containers, windshields, and vehicle parts. The second question, there's only one gyre in the ocean and therefore only one garbage patch. That is false. So there's 5 total, and there is garbage collecting at each one of them, unfortunately. The third one, plastic is a synthetic polymer that does not biodegrade in our environment. That is very true. And that's something that's really important for people to understand, is that it does not go away. It just breaks down into smaller plastics. Number 4, what can we do to keep plastic out of our rivers and oceans? And yes, you can do any of those things, can be very helpful. All right, so this is my final slide. And I just wanted to point out a couple resources to you all. and one of them is discoverwater.org. So if you are a student or if you have students at home, if you're a parent, we have several resources online that are available for free to use. And you can investigate cool things like discover our ocean, our water cycle, how much water we have on planet Earth. And then we also have distant learning activities up as well. So if you want to visit our website, you can check out what we have available for free for you there. I also have listed our Facebook page and my email. If you ever have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Tom.
When I go out and about around the state doing environmental education with young people, we often talk about reduce, reuse, recycle, and most everybody is aware of this term and are familiar with it. And I really like to emphasize the order of this because I think reducing is the most important aspect of this saying. And you know, if we don't have to recycle as much or reuse as much if we don't produce as much. That's kind of the way I look at it. And there are about 7.5 billion people on the planet and about 350 million people in the United States. So we make up about 4% of the Earth's population, but we produce the most waste of any country. I've seen different numbers on the percentage of waste that we produce, and it's the one that I see the most is about 30%. So we make up, to say that again, we make up 4% of the planet's population, but produce 30% of its waste. So I think it's really important to talk to young people about ways to start reducing the amount of trash and the waste that we produce. Most of that's not recycled. Most of that ends up in landfills or incinerated, or it ends up in the environment. So that's a really big issue. Recycling is great, but recycling is not a perfect system. There are areas everywhere that don't have recycling, including in West Virginia. There's several counties that don't have viable recycling programs, and people would like to recycle, but they don't have anywhere to take recyclables. The other issue about recycling is that it is a business, and there are downtimes, there are downturns. The market isn't great for plastic or aluminum or steel or paper or whatever you're trying to recycle. So if recyclables aren't making money, they're not going to take recyclables. So that leaves people with nowhere to turn to recycle. So that's where reuse really becomes important. And the average American produces about 4.5 pounds of trash a day. So if you go around your house and try to find something that weighs about 4 or 5 pounds and pick it up, you'll realize that's a pretty significant amount. As Tomi mentioned, plastic bags are a big issue. Single-use plastic. So that slide there is very telling. 100 billion used and disposed of in the United States every year. 12 minutes, the average time we use a plastic bag, and 2 billion used worldwide every minute. I try to tell young people, when you go to the store and you buy a pack of gum or a greeting card or something really small and they try to put it in a plastic bag, just tell them no thank you and don't bring it home in the first place. There's a lot of times when you go to the store where you don't need plastic bags. Of course, it's a better option if you do to use reusable bags rather than plastic. People try to reuse plastic bags at home by picking up after their dog or using them as trash can liners. Problem with that is they eventually go back into the trash and into the landfill. We want to try to avoid that. So the best option is to try to limit our use, try to reduce, there's that word again, the amount of plastic bags that we bring home. So some reuse ideas, Tomi mentioned, you can find a lot of things online. People are taking plastic bags and weaving them together to make mats or jump ropes. That picture at the bottom right there is it's like a little bowl made from a plastic bag with a reused plastic lid on the bottom as the base. Water bottles obviously are a big issue. 38 billion water bottles are buried in the US landfills every year. I didn't do a slide on this, but I wrote down some numbers. an estimated 500 billion plastic bottles will be sold in 2020. And globally, people buy 1 million plastic bottles per minute. Buy 1 million plastic bottles per minute. Think about that. That's a lot of plastic bottles out there. So obviously some options there is I try to impart on young folks to try to use reusable bottles and or drink tap water as an alternative to buying plastic bottled water. Okay, Tommy. So there's not viable recycling options for you to if you have plastic bottles to dispose of. Of course, there's all kinds of ideas on the internet on what you can do with them. The bird feeders are popular. The picture there in the middle is actually wind chimes, and if you notice, the top is a cut off plastic bottle. I thought that was really neat. And then the bottom is storage and a little car or truck for bottles there. Some marketers and companies are trying to make different types of bottles. That Green Planet bottle there on the left, I don't know where all that's available, but that's made from 100% plants, petroleum free. And the Just Water bottle on the right is a paper-based bottle. I don't really buy a lot of bottled water, so I'm not sure what all is out there, but what stores those are in. I think the Just Water is here locally. I haven't seen the Green Planet bottle, but there's probably other options as well, similar type bottles. So detergent bottles are another type of bottle that's easy to reuse if you can't recycle them. There's some ideas there. The one, let's see, the ice melt, I thought that was a good one because, ice melt or rock salt, it's similar to table salt, so sodium and chlorides, and the chlorides dissolve pretty easily, and high amounts of chloride obviously aren't good for our waterways. It gets washed in the storm drain. So I think that by using, kind of improvising and using a detergent bottle as kind of a spreader would prevent you from putting down too much rock salt. And if you're trying to melt ice, so I thought that was a really good idea there. Then to store, looks like screws there on the bottom right as a dog food dispenser. It's a lot easier pouring it out of that than maybe a big bag of dog food. And then somebody used one as a little trash can in their car. The problem with that is it looks like they have a plastic bag liner there, so I'm not crazy about that, but those are all really good ideas that could use for bottles. There's also, of course, the most environmentally friendly way to clean your driveway or sidewalk would be just to shovel it. That's quite a workout, but that would be, or you can use sometimes sand, or I've seen people use coffee grounds as well. I don't know how well that works to melt ice away, but those are alternatives to rock salt too. There's some ideas for milk cartons. It looks like a water, garden water there on the upper left, and some planters, some storage, and the bottom left looks like they just drew on some milk cartons for Halloween decorations. So it's always good just to kind of think of ways you can fun ways or practical ways you can reuse items that that you would like to recycle, but maybe recycling is not available to you. And then that way, it prevents them from going into the trash and into landfills. So I mentioned earlier our recycled hat contest the youth program is putting on, and it's normally part of our youth day. All the youth groups that are there, we have a parade, and they're given the option of making parade hats, and then we judge our favorite parade hats. So we're not having youth day this year, so we've kind of opened this up to everybody. If they wanted to make a hat out of a recycled product, it could be out of newspaper, magazines, plastic water bottles, anything that's recyclable, you can make a hat out of. The photo there in the upper left, those are actually egg cartons that people made hats out of. I thought that was really neat. And there's information there. Basically, you make your hat and take a photo and email it to that address there, dep.yep@wv.gov by May 14th. Then we're going to take all the photos and put them on Facebook and let the public vote on the winners. There are a few rules, just include your name, age, and the county, and also you have to be 18 or under to participate. So we thought that was a really fun way to encourage people to recycle and reuse. And also, since we can't have the event this year, we thought it would be a good way to go ahead and have it kind of virtually. So Tommy, I guess you'll have to launch this final poll. So the questions there: what youth organizations is it the West Virginia Youth Environmental Program open to? When it comes to protecting the environment, the 3 R's refer to reduce, reuse, recycle. That's a true, false. And about how many plastic water bottles are disposed of in landfills in the U.S. every year? I think was there one more question at the bottom?
Yep, the average time a plastic bag is used.
Okay. So we'll give you a few seconds to do that.
All right, so the results there, Tom, you should be able to see in there what youth organizations in West Virginia Youth Environmental Program open to, and the answer was all of above. When it comes to promoting the environment, the 3 R's refer to reduce, reuse, and recycle, and that's true. Everybody got that one right. Nice job. About how many plastic water bottles are disposed of in the landfill in the U.S. every year? And Tom, you have to remind me of which number was correct on that one.
I believe it was 38 billion.
All right, and that's what most of our folks guessed, so nice job, you all. And the average time a plastic shopping bag is used: 5 hours, 1 hour, 45 minutes, or 12 minutes?
And it was 12 minutes.
All right, most folks got that one right too.
I just want to put this one last slide up about enrolling in the youth program. If you're interested, as I mentioned before, it's free. There's no obligations. And if you go to that website there, www.dep.wv.gov, and click on Youth Environmental Program, you'll see it on the main page of the website. It'll take you to that photo there of the young man and the Youth Environmental Program logo on the left. All you do is click Enroll Now, and it's a very easy form to fill out. It's an electronic form. Once you fill it out, you hit Submit, and we'll get it, and you'll be enrolled. And that's all there is to it. It's very easy. And also, there's my contact information down there if you need to reach me for anything. I'd be glad to talk to you. Our Facebook address is down there as well if you wanted to investigate or explore that hat contest further. You can go to our Facebook page, and there's more information on it there.
All right, so that concludes our presentation. If anybody has a question, you can type it in the chat box or the question box. We can see them at either place. So we'll give just a few seconds if anybody does have any lingering questions. Otherwise, just want to thank you very much for joining us this morning and taking an interest in helping reducing plastics from getting into our waterways. It does take everybody working towards that goal. And we hope everybody is staying safe wherever it is that you're located. And thanks to everybody that joined us from outside of West Virginia as well. That's a nice thing to see. Looks like we don't have any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and end this meeting so that we end right on time. Tom, did you have anything else that you would like to say?
I did, and thanks to everybody for listening in. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you all. Everybody take care.